All right, hello guys. Today we are going to talk about estimating roots. So our learning objective is that at the end of this, you're going to be able to estimate non-perfect roots. So again, remember, non-perfect roots are the ones that are going to give you decimal. They do not give you a whole number, therefore they're irrational. And we're going to round it either to the tenths or the hundredth or the nearest indicated rounding place, and that is 8EE2. We're going to do a quick little rounding review. Before we do that, let's draw our attention to this picture right here in the top right-hand corner. So this has just the different place values. So obviously to the left of the decimal point, we have our ones, our tens, our hundredths, our thousands. But to the right of the decimal point, we have our tenths place, our hundredths place, and our thousands place. Occasionally you'll see your 10,000s place, but for the most part, we're just going to be sticking with our tenths and our hundredths today. So before we get going, we have to do a little bit of a rounding review. So when we are rounding, step one, you're going to find the place value that they're asking for, and you're going to underline it. So if they ask you to round to the nearest tenth, you're going to find the tenths place, which is just one to the right, and underline it. Once you have underlined it, you're going to look at the digit that is next door to the right. So you're going to look at its neighbor to the right. So we underline, and then we look at its neighbor to the right-hand side. If it is 4 or less, you let it rest. So if it's 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, you let it rest. If it's 5 or more, you raise the score. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're going to raise the score. Let's go ahead and practice. So example 1, 3.768 to the nearest tenth. So step 1 says find the place value that they're asking for. They're asking for the tenths. The tenths is just one place to the right, so I'm going to underline the 7. And then I look at its neighbor to the right. Its neighbor is 6. And then I ask myself, if is it 4 or less or 5 or more? It is 5 or more, so I'm going to raise the score. So I'm going to make 7 a bigger number. The next number is 8. So 3.768 to the nearest tenth is 3.8. All right, let's try number 2. Round 5.325, or 5 and 325 10,000ths. Or no, yes, no. 5 and 325 thousandths to the nearest tenth. So the tenth is 3. I need to look at its neighbor, which is 2. 2 is under the 4 or less, so I'm going to let it rest, so it stays. Therefore, the 3 doesn't do anything. It rests. It stays. So 5.325 to the nearest tenth is 5.3. Example 3. We have 0.75623 to the nearest hundredth. So the hundredth place is actually 2 over, so it's the 5 in this case. Its neighbor is a 6. Since the 6 is 5 or more, I raise the score. So that 5 needs to go up 1. So after 5 is 6, so it would be 0.76. And then example 4, round 1.334 to the nearest hundredth. The hundredths place is this 3, the second 3. I look at its neighbor, which is 4. Since it is 4 or less, it stays, it rests. So it becomes just 1.33, it stays. So that is rounding. You should have learned this a while ago, so we just did a quick review because you're going to need it. All right. Oops. Don't know what that was. All right. You did this yesterday with Ms. Dupakowski, but we're just going to go over real quick how you do it on your calculator. So square roots, remember the radical, it's just a radical by itself. The square root symbol, the radical symbol. To type it into your calculator, you hit the second button. So second. And then you hit the x squared button, which is also, it's right next to the 7. And then you're going to type in whatever your number is and hit the enter button or the equals. So again, you learned this yesterday, but to do square roots, remember square roots only have the radical. It is second, x squared, type your number in, and then hit enter. For cubed roots, the cube root has this little 3 on the outside. So you're going to hit, oops, let's go back. back. You're going to type in 3 for the cubed, second. And then we call this the caret button. It is like an upside down V, or it's an arrow. So the V. And then you type in your number just like usual and hit the enter button. So make sure you have that information, because all you're going to be doing is typing these into your calculator and then rounding. So here we go. Let's try it out. Rounding square roots to the nearest tenth. Let's just do our little reminder. When we are doing square roots, we hit the second button, x squared. We type our number in, and then we just hit enter. So second, x squared, we're going to type our number in. So our first number is 147. So I hit second, x squared, 147, and I hit enter. And what I do is I always write 4 decimal places after. So 12.1243. They want us to round to the nearest tenth. Remember, the tenths place is this one directly to the right. So I need to look to its neighbor, which is this 2. Since 2 is 4 or less, it rests. So the square root of 147 rounded to the nearest tenth is just 12.1, because that 2 says, hey, you got to rest, you just stay. Let's try the square root of 19. So second, x squared, the square root of 19. You get approximately 4.3588. The tenths place is this place where the 3 is. So I look at its neighbor, which is 5. 4 or less, you let it rest. 5 or more, you raise the score. So since it is 5, this 3 has to go up 1. So it becomes 4.4. The square root of 27. So in our calculator, you hit second, x squared, 27. And you get 5.1961. Cut it off. The tenths place is right here, so I underline it. I look to its neighbor, which is this 9. And then I ask myself, is it 4 or less or 5 or more? It is 5 or more, so I'm going to raise the score. So 5.1 becomes 5.2. And then our last one, rounding square roots to the nearest tenth, is the square root of 111. So I hit second, x squared, type in 111 and hit enter. And when I do so, I get 10.5356. Since they want the tenths place, I underline it. I look to its neighbor to the right, which is a 3. 3 is 4 or less, so it's going to rest. Therefore, it is just 10.5. Box my answer. So that is rounding square roots to the nearest tenth. Next, we're going to look at cube roots, rounding cube roots to the nearest tenth. Rounding cube roots, our calculator reminders that we type in 3, second, the caret button, which is just diagonal to the 7. It's right above the x squared. And then we're going to type in our number and hit enter. So those are the calculating buttons that you need to hit. We're going to do the cubed root of 83. To do the cubed root of 83, you hit 3, second, the caret button. We're going to type in 83 and hit enter. And then again, I'm just going to write out 4 decimal places to the right, so 4.3620. They want the tenths again. Again, the tenths place is this one, so I underline it. And I look to its neighbor, which is a 6. 6 is 5 or more, so I'm going to raise the score. So 4.3 becomes 4.4. And then I box my answer. I do the same thing with the cubed root of 52. I'm going to hit 3, second caret, and hit 52 and hit enter. I get 3.7325 when I cut it off. They want the tenths place, so I underline the tenths place. And I look to its neighbor, which is a 3. Since the neighbor is 4 or less, I let it rest. Therefore, the 7 gets to stay, so it's 3.7. The last one is the cubed root of 212. So you hit 3, second caret, type in 212 and hit enter. When I do so, I get 5.9627 when I cut it off to 4 decimals places. The tenths place is this 9. So I look to its neighbor, which is a 6. Since the 6 is 5 or more, I'm going to raise the score. However, my 9 can't be raised anymore. Nothing after 9 comes 10, and I can't put 10 in that decimal place. So what I have to do is 5.9, I think of that as 59, and I raise it 1 up, which is 60, or 6.0. You don't encounter those a lot, but you do need to know how to handle them in case there is a 9. So that is cube roots to the nearest 10th. We're going to do square roots to the hundredths and then cube root to the hundredths. We're not going to do as many examples just because you do know how to put them into your calculator now. But speaking of calculator, when you're doing square roots, you just hit the second button, x squared, type the number in, and hit enter. So here we go. We have the square root of 87. So I hit second, x squared, type in 87, and hit enter. And I get 9.3, ooh, that's not a 3, my bad, 9.3273. This time they want the hundredths place. So the hundredths place is actually the second one in. So I'm going to underline the 2 and look at its neighbor of 7. Since the 7 is 5 or more, I'm going to raise the score of the 2. So that 2 just goes up 1 and it becomes a 3. So 9.33 is rounded to the nearest hundredth. I'm going to do the same thing with the square root of 251. So I hit second, x squared, type in 251. When I do so, I get 15.8429 when I cut it off to 4 decimal places. I underline the hundredths place and look to its neighbor. Its neighbor is a 2, which is 4 or less, therefore it rests. So 15.8429 just becomes 15.84 when you're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So those are square roots, my apologies, square roots to the nearest hundredth. Last up, we just have cube roots to the nearest hundredth. Reminder of our calculator keys that we press 3, second, caret, which is just the upside down V. We type in our number and we hit enter. So those are the calculator buttons that we need to hit. So here we go. The cubed root of 15, I hit 3, second, caret, hit 15 and hit enter. I'm going to write down 4 places to the right of the decimal, and I get 2.4662. Again, they want the hundredths place, so I'm going to underline the hundredths place, which is just 2 over. No. We're there. I'm getting there. Technical difficulties. Here we go. And then I circle the 6. Since it is 5 or more, I raise the score, so the neighbor becomes higher. And it is 2.47, or 2 47 hundredths. Make sure your decimal's neatly there. We're going to do the same thing with the cubed root of 1215. So 3, second, caret, 1215. And when I do that, and I get 10.6706 when I cut it off to 4 places. Again, they want the hundredths, so I go ahead and underline the hundredths place. Look at its neighbor. Our neighbor is just 0, which is obviously 4 or less. Therefore, it rests. So when you round it, it would just be 10.67 or 10 67 hundredths. So that is estimating roots. The hardest part is just either A, putting it into your calculator, so make sure you have written down all of the calculating buttons to either do the square root or the cubed root, or B, it's your rounding. And we've been doing rounding for a couple years now in math class, so make sure that you have followed the rules. You always look to see, do they want the tenths or do they want the hundredths? And then you just look at its neighbor. 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. That's all I got for you. Let's start estimating roots.